It depends on what exam you're taking, but I think of it as, again, the business cycle, and we're trying to figure out where we're at in the business cycle. So if I'm, at the side of the road and I want to see where I'm going, but I want to know where I'm at and I want to know where I've been to kind of get triangulated. Now, in all the exams, nobody expects you to be an economist, but they do expect you're not going to embarrass the firm at a cocktail party, right? And so the indicators you're going to get tested on are primarily leading economic indicators that tell us where we're going, not coincident where we're at, not lagging. I think of it as I'm in a train and I want to see where I'm going, I'm going to look at the locomotive. If I'm on a train and I want to know where I'm at, I'm going to look out the window and see where we're at. And if I want to see where we're in, I'm going to look at the caboose. The two leading economic indicators you get tested on. There's two. And again, this is another area. If you tell me you missed your mark because of indicators, I'm going to say, I don't think so. Sometimes you can get it right with just the grammar, knowing, the building permits, something that's going to happen. It's not one of the two, but you get the idea here. Building permits, retail sales, something that's kind of coincident. So you can almost kind of reverse engineer it that way. I have a whole video on economics. And, the title of that video quotes Lord John Maynard Keynes, who said, money is like a giant floating crap game. It's always going from one place to another. So the two leading economic indicators you get tested on are stock prices, the S&P 500, for example, or the Dow, because the stock market is all about earnings or future expectations of earnings. So you do get asked that as a leading economic indicator. The other one you get tested on is an inverted yield curve. An inverted yield curve. That's a negative leading economic indicator. So two test questions there. What is an inverted yield curve? Is when short-term rates on short-term bonds are higher than rates on long-term bonds. Because usually a normal yield curve, the longer you would lock up your money, the more risk you'd be taking in terms of being exposed to inflation and rising interest rates. And the reason for that is when the Fed is concerned about the economy, what they do to slow it down and put a dent to demand, test question, this is called monetary policy, is they raise short-term interest rates. And rather than slowing down the economy, they end up sometimes putting us in a recession. And remember the Fed, when they were doing that, were being asked, are you afraid about putting the economy into a recession? And Jerome Powell said, well, if it's necessary, we hope it's not. And when he was doing his review of Congress, they said, do you feel pretty proud of your ability to have managed that inflation without, putting the economy into a recession? That too, by the way, is very testable. A recession would be 2 calendar quarters of declining GDP. Very testable. Our German friends have had 2 calendar quarters of declining GDP. They're officially in a recession. A depression is 6 calendar quarters of declining GDP. Woo! I like Will Rogers' definition. He said, a recession is when your neighbor's out of work and a depression is when you're out of work. Now, Lord John Maynard Keynes would be very happy with the Germans' response to their declining GDP using fiscal policy, very testable. Fiscal policy is government spending and taxation. And the German government announced $1 trillion in government spending to stimulate demand to get out of the recession. $500 billion for infrastructure, $500 billion for defense. Woo, woo, woo. As that inverted yield curve is, again, what is it? And it's a negative leading economic indicator. So again, it's more important to know where how that relates to the business cycle, how that relates to monetary and fiscal policy. You didn't tell me what exam you're taking, but everything I said is appropriate for the SIE and the